Most Christians know what happened on the day Jesus was crucified, and they know what happened on the day he rose from the dead. But what the disciples actually did during the 3 days in between is a part of the story that is often overlooked. After the crucifixion, the disciples weren't preaching. They weren't expecting a resurrection, and they weren't fully understanding what was about to happen next. Instead, the Bible describes a group of followers struggling to make sense of the most shocking event of their lives. Some were afraid, some were grieving, some were hiding behind locked doors. The women were preparing spices for a body they expected to find in a tomb, and no one yet realized that history was only halfway through its most important weekend. So, where were the disciples during those 3 days? What does Scripture actually say they were doing? And why are these often forgotten events so important for understanding the resurrection itself? In this video, we'll follow the biblical account step by step and uncover what happened during the 3 days nobody talks about. Close your eyes. It is Friday evening, just after sundown. You are standing in a narrow stone alley in the upper city of Jerusalem. The smell of smoke in the air. Somewhere nearby, a woman is crying. The street is empty. An hour ago, the man you spent 3 years following was dead. You watched them take him down from the cross. You watched them carry him to the tomb. You watched them seal it with a stone. And now you are standing in the dark. You do not know what to do next. 11 men scattered across Jerusalem that evening. The Gospels barely mention them between the crucifixion and the resurrection. But archaeology, history, and a careful reading of the text itself tell us exactly where they went, exactly what they were afraid of, exactly what those 3 days felt like from the inside, and what they reveal will completely change how you picture those hours. First, understand what had just happened to them legally. Jesus had been executed by Rome on a charge of sedition. Claiming to be the king of the Jews was a political crime, a capital crime. His execution sent one unmistakable message to everyone connected with him. You could be next. The disciples were not being paranoid, they were being rational. 3 years earlier, John the Baptist had been arrested and beheaded. His disciples came and took his body and buried him. That is all Matthew records. They scattered, and Jesus had been John's successor. Now Jesus was dead. The Sanhedrin had driven the execution. Pilate had signed it. The soldiers had carried it out. The entire machinery of both Jewish and Roman authority had aligned against one teacher from Galilee, and his followers had watched every second of it. Now picture where they were. John chapter 20 tells us the disciples were gathered behind locked doors for fear of the Jewish authorities. Locked doors. The Greek word is keklaismenon. It means bolted shut, barred, not merely closed. They were not in one of the outer districts of the city. They were in the upper room, a room in the wealthy upper city of Jerusalem, one of the densest, most surveilled neighborhoods in the entire region. They chose that room for a reason. It belonged to someone with enough status to have a large upper floor, someone the authorities were less likely to raid without cause. The early church tradition names the host as the family of John Mark, whose mother Mary had a large house mentioned in Acts chapter 12, wealthy enough to have servants, connected enough to offer some protection. Now, let us go through the 3 days. Friday night. The Sabbath had begun at sundown, which meant that even if the disciples had wanted to leave Jerusalem, they could not. The Sabbath law forbade travel beyond a short distance from your home. The Sabbath prohibited work, buying, selling, and travel. They were locked in the city for the entire next day. By Roman custom, Passover week meant soldiers everywhere. The temple was full. The streets were full. The city had swelled from its normal population of 80,000 to somewhere over 200,000 pilgrims. Movement through the city meant exposure, so they stayed. Picture 11. Men in a single room on a Friday night, no wine left. The Passover meal had been the night before, no food being prepared, the Sabbath prohibited it. The oil lamps burning low, the sound of the city outside, muffled and ordinary, as if nothing had changed. Peter in the corner. Peter, who 3 times in a single night had looked people in the eye and said, "I do not know the man." The rooster had crowed. Jesus had turned and looked at him. He had gone outside and wept bitterly. That is all Luke records. Now it was Friday night, and the man he had denied was dead. And the question that no gospel records, but that every person in that room was asking, was the same question. Did we get it wrong? 3 years. 3 years of following, watching, listening. Of miracles, of crowds, of moments that felt like the beginning of something. And it ended like this. A borrowed tomb outside the city walls, sealed with a Roman stone. Judas was gone. They did not know yet what had become of him. One of their 12 had sold Jesus for 30 pieces of silver and then disappeared into the city. Matthew chapter 27 records that when Judas saw Jesus had been condemned, he was filled with remorse. He threw the money into the temple and went out and hanged himself. But the 11 did not know this yet. They knew only that someone they had eaten with, traveled with, trusted, had walked into the high priest's courtyard and handed Jesus over for 30 silver coins, and that the man was somewhere in Jerusalem. Saturday, the Sabbath. The women who had followed Jesus from Galilee, Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, Salome, had watched where the tomb was on Friday evening. Luke chapter 23 records that they went home and prepared spices and perfumes, and then they rested on the Sabbath in obedience to the commandment. Even in grief, even in shock, they kept the Sabbath. This is one of the most revealing details in the entire Passion narrative. These women, and by extension the disciples sheltering in the upper room, were not abandoning their faith. They were grieving within it. The Sabbath still came, the commandment still held, the prayers were still said, the Shema was still whispered in the dark. "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one." They said it because they had always said it, because their whole life had been structured around saying it. Even when the man who had told them God was his father was lying sealed in a tomb. Now here is what most people miss about Saturday. The chief priests and the Pharisees went to Pilate. Matthew chapter 27 records the meeting. They said, "Sir, we remember that while he was still alive, that deceiver said, 'After 3 days I will rise again.' So give the order for the tomb to be made secure until the 3rd day." Pilate agreed. A guard was posted. The stone was sealed with an official Roman seal. The religious authorities were more worried about the resurrection claim than the disciples were. The disciples were hiding. The priests were taking precautions. Sunday, before dawn, the women left with their spices. They did not go to witness a resurrection. They went to finish preparing a body. In 1st century Jewish burial practice, a body was wrapped quickly on the day of death, especially in this case because the Sabbath had begun before the full preparation was complete. The women were going back to do what had been left undone, to anoint the body with the expensive spices they had prepared, to say goodbye properly. Mark chapter 16 records one of them asking the others, "Who will roll the stone away from the entrance of the tomb?" They knew there was a stone. They knew it was too heavy for them. They went anyway. Now picture the upper room as dawn breaks on Sunday. The men are still there, still behind the locked door. And then, running footsteps on the stone stairs, Mary Magdalene bursts through the door, breathless, eyes wide. They have taken the Lord out of the tomb, and we do not know where they have put him. The first response was not joy, it was confusion, then panic, then argument. Peter and John ran. John chapter 20 records that John outran Peter and arrived first. He stopped at the entrance and looked in. He saw the linen cloths lying there. He did not go in. Peter arrived. Peter went straight in. He saw the burial cloths. He saw the cloth that had been wrapped around Jesus' head, folded separately, placed apart from the others. Not unwrapped in a hurry, folded, laid aside deliberately. And then John went in. He saw and believed. That is all John says. He saw the empty grave cloths. He believed. But the others did not. Mark chapter 16 is blunt. When they heard that Jesus was alive and that she had seen him, they did not believe it. Luke chapter 24 says these words seemed to them like nonsense. The disciples, the 11 men who had spent 3 years watching Jesus, did not believe the resurrection had happened until they saw it themselves. They were not people of extraordinary faith. They were people of ordinary doubt. People who had locked a door on Friday night because they were afraid, and had spent 3 days in a room asking the same question everyone asks when everything falls apart. Did we get it wrong? And the answer that came back on Sunday morning was not a word. It was an empty tomb, a folded cloth, and a woman running up the stairs with her hair loose and her eyes full of something no one in that room had a word for yet. Step back. Those 3 days, Friday night to Sunday morning, are the most human days in the entire gospel story. Not the miracles, not the sermons, not the feeding of 5,000. These 3 days, 11 frightened people in a locked room, grieving, doubting, saying their prayers in the dark because they had always said them, not because they were certain, because they did not know what else to do. And that, more than almost anything else in the Gospels, is what makes them recognizable. If this changed how you see the men who built the early church, subscribe to Bible Radar. Tell me in the comments, what hit you hardest? Peter in the corner on Friday night, the women who kept the Sabbath in grief, or the folded cloth? If you liked this video, please consider liking it and subscribing to Bible Radar for more videos like this.